Let's dive straight into the most daring mission in human history. Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. You know that iconic transmission from July 20th, 1969? It wasn't just a simple status update. It was the absolute climax of a tense, years-long thriller born straight out of the Cold War. The space race was literally in full swing, and man, the stakes for global supremacy and technological dominance could not have been higher.
Section 1. The ultimate national goal. To really grasp the pressure of that exact moment, we've got to look back at the wildly audacious challenge President John F. Kennedy threw down in May 1961, land a human on the moon and bring him back safely before the decade was out. I mean, doing this meant inventing entirely new branches of science and engineering, literally from scratch.
And to meet that completely impossible deadline, NASA built the Saturn V launch vehicle. This beast was a staggering 363 feet tall. To put that into perspective for you, that's taller than a 36-story building. Just imagine a skyscraper packed to the absolute brim with explosive rocket fuel, ready to just defy Earth's gravity.
Moving on to Section 2. Meet the Apollo 11 crew. Because, well, to tame a rocket of that magnitude, NASA needed the absolute perfect crew strapped inside that colossal machine. That prime crew? It was Commander Neil Armstrong, Lunar Module Pilot Edwin Buzz Aldrin, and Command Module Pilot Michael Collins. All three of these guys were seasoned space veterans, each embarking on their second and what would ultimately be their final spaceflight. They had this precise, incredible blend of engineering brilliance, piloting skill, and just ice-cold nerves required to pull this off.
Section 3. The mighty Saturn V. Let's actually dig into the incredible tech that carried them across 240,000 miles of completely unforgiving space.
So, the Apollo spacecraft itself was actually divided into three distinct, crucial parts. First, you had the command module, named Columbia. This housed the astronauts and was literally the only piece designed to survive the trip back to Earth. Right behind it was the service module, which provided all the essential propulsion, oxygen, and power. And finally, tucked away inside was the lunar module, the Eagle, which was designed exclusively to operate in the vacuum and low gravity of the moon.
Now, to push this massively complex payload into space, on the morning of July 16, 1969, the fully fueled Saturn V rocket weighed a mind-bending 6,698,700 pounds. As it lifted off from Florida, hundreds of millions of people around the entire globe watched on their TVs, just listening as those engines produced millions of pounds of thrust to finally break the bonds of Earth. Section 4. Landing the Eagle. Now, the launch was completely flawless, but as any aerospace engineer will tell you, getting into space is only half the battle. The true supreme ordeal of Apollo 11 was the descent to the lunar surface itself. The whole mission relied on this rapid, nail-biting succession of critical events. Right after launch came the translunar injection. That's the massive engine burn that basically slingshotted them toward the moon. Following a 3-day coast through the void, they slipped into lunar orbit. And then came the moment of truth. Armstrong and Aldrin crawled into the Eagle, separated from Columbia, and initiated their power descent toward the Sea of Tranquility. But right when they needed absolute pinpoint focus, the tension spiked. The guidance computer suddenly began flashing a 1202 program alarm. Basically, this meant the computer's memory was full and it was getting completely overloaded with data. Can you imagine the panic? But Mission Control, back in Houston, quickly analyzed the simulations they'd run on Earth, and they made the incredibly gutsy call to just proceed with the landing. The drama wasn't over yet, though. At just 500 feet above the lunar surface, Armstrong realized the automatic computer was guiding them straight into a super dangerous, rock-strewn crater. So with fuel running critically low, he just took manual control of the Eagle, steering it almost like a helicopter, until he successfully touched down on a smooth, level plane.
Section 5. One small step. With the Eagle safely landed, it was finally time to make history. You can bet the anticipation down on Earth was absolutely palpable as the astronauts got ready to open that hatch.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Stepping onto the lunar soil, Armstrong delivered those immortal words. And here's a fascinating piece of trivia for you. In the overwhelming adrenaline of the moment, Armstrong famously skipped the word A in his prepared statement. But honestly, the meaning echoed around the world perfectly regardless. Humanity had officially arrived. Buzz Aldrin's crisply defined footprint perfectly captures the totally alien environment they had just stepped into.
He actually photographed this print specifically as part of a scientific study to understand the nature of the lunar soil and how it compacted under a person's weight. Today, it remains this enduring, iconic symbol of our very first visit to another world.
Almost immediately upon stepping off the ladder, Armstrong described the surface as fine and powdery, almost like powdered charcoal, actually. And what's really amazing is that despite wearing those super bulky, pressurized spacesuits, both astronauts noted they had absolutely no difficulty moving around in the moon's low gravity, which, remember, is only 1/6 that of Earth's.
Now, they definitely weren't just out there sightseeing. They spent about 2.5 hours outside the spacecraft executing a highly intense scientific agenda. They planted the U.S. flag, took a historic, literal, long-distance phone call from President Nixon, and deployed vital instruments like a solar wind device, laser reflectors to measure the distance back to Earth, and a passive seismometer. Plus, they carefully collected about 47.5 pounds of rocks and soil to bring home with them.
Section 6. Return and Global Legacy. After spending a total of 21 hours and 38 minutes on the lunar surface, it was time to blast off, reunite with Michael Collins, and head home.
That wildly complex return journey was executed flawlessly. They used the Eagle's ascent stage to launch back up into orbit, successfully docked with Columbia, and fired their engines for the trans-Earth injection. That was the final engine burn they needed to push them out of the moon's gravity and back towards Earth. The whole mission concluded triumphantly when the command module safely splashed down in the Pacific Ocean on July 24th.
But wait, the mission wasn't quite over. Immediately upon their return, the astronauts were placed in a super strict 21-day quarantine inside a specialized lunar receiving laboratory because, well, no one knew for absolute certain what was up there on the moon. So NASA had to be 100% sure they hadn't accidentally brought back any dangerous alien lunar pathogens to Earth.
Finally emerging from quarantine, the astronauts were transformed into instant global heroes. I'm talking massive ticker tape parades and a huge worldwide tour. Apollo 11 didn't just win the space race, it cemented an incredible legacy of human exploration. It paved the way for a total of 12 humans to walk on the lunar surface and completely redefined what was scientifically and politically possible for our species. So, as we stand on the brink of humanity's next giant leap with the upcoming Artemis program, it really makes you wonder, will this new era of lunar exploration capture the global imagination, quite like Apollo 11 did all those decades ago? Ask yourself, what kind of new scientific breakthroughs might this next chapter bring? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer.